Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. The other day I was talking with a friend of mine and we were talking about the idea of becoming rich and what it takes to actually get there. There's often an objection thrown out when you're talking about rich people, in that someone will say that that person was lucky in how they got there and it's not exactly a repeatable process. Well, I'm going to try to put that to rest and talk a little bit about luck, of course, because it is somewhat of a factor. But I really think the big key to becoming financially independent or becoming wealthy or whatever it is, some sort of big financial goal, really is a very simple equation. And the equation looks something like this. You have discipline plus savvy equals wealth, or big target, whatever it is. Sorry if my whiteboard writing is less than ideal. I don't have a ton of practice. Now, you might say that this equation looks very simple, and you would be right to note that. But let's talk a little bit more about these two factors up here, discipline and savvy. So by discipline, what I really mean is the ability to sort of put the blinders on and stick to whatever your plan is. Having that discipline of being able to put money in your savings account every single week. Maybe the discipline to move a portion of your paycheck towards your savings or investments every single month, as opposed to someone who might not have a more rigid process and might be tempted to spend it on something that won't get them towards their goals. So we're really talking about the ability to follow a plan here, and also the ability to do this over an extended period of time. That is something that is not easy to do. A lot of people can be disciplined for a week or two, but talk about years, and now we're getting a much smaller group of people who can really do that and can really get through thick and thin and stick to their plan in order to get to their overarching goal. But that's just one factor. This other factor here is savvy, and what I really mean by savvy is a little bit of practical knowledge. And when I say a little bit, that is what I mean, a little bit of knowledge. We're not talking about needing to be an encyclopedia of all financial topics ever. You just need to be a little bit knowledgeable about some of the options out there, maybe understanding how compound interest works, maybe understanding what opportunity cost is, and some of these basic financial topics that really can go a long way towards making you that much smarter than the average person, even though these topics really aren't all that complicated. Perhaps this is a result of the fact that many people don't actually learn these things because the school system doesn't really talk much about them. But in any event, a lot of people really are totally clueless when it comes to budgeting, saving, investing, and pretty much everything as it has to do with finance. And for this savvy factor, if you're trying to reach financial independence and just have enough income coming in from your investments to pay for your expenses, it's not as though you have to be one of the best investors in the world. You just have to find some ways to keep that ball rolling and find some investment options that work for you. And thankfully, there are simple ways to invest in the stock market, for example, with something like index funds. And maybe you can start a small real estate portfolio with a property or two. And that could put you in a much better position long-term because you have those cash flowing assets that will pay you over time. And that money can then be reinvested into other things. Again, we're not talking about building some complicated fund or something like that would take a lot of knowledge and expertise and getting through legal issues. Really, we're just talking about spending less than you make and then taking those savings and investing them into quality assets. It does not have to be complicated, but even just a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of savvy in understanding what some of the better investment options out there are, that is really enough to get this equation satisfied. So we have discipline up here, savvy equals wealth. The problem is a lot of people will have one, but not the other. And a lot of people have neither of these. And those are often the same people who complain the most or talk about how it's all luck and that nothing you do is going to matter. And they might say that all rich people are lucky or otherwise thieves, in which case it's probably going to be very hard to convince them otherwise because they're probably dead set on those values. But whatever the case, let's talk about this luck issue. And with luck, especially when it comes to building wealth, I think the one big luck factor, if we can pick it, which is sort of like this sort of random chance metric, the random chance that something is in your favor. In that case, I think the biggest luck factor is where you're born. And if you're born in a country that has robust property rights and very mature markets that people trust, and there are systems in place to enforce laws and take care of disputes between private parties, that's really the big sort of luck factor here. Once you're there, you're already in a pretty lucky spot. Now it's what you do with that situation. And of course, there are some other things that you can't control, especially when it comes to health. And you can definitely make some pretty convincing arguments about the family you're born into as well. But at a certain point, people do have individual control over their lives. And that's where this equation comes in and you can start doing something about it. Compared to someone who might be coming in with a big inheritance or something like that, you just might need a bit more discipline and savvy to get up to that level. But you could also make an argument that the person who doesn't have discipline and savvy but gets a big lump sum inheritance, they're probably not going to hold on to that wealth for very long anyways, and will probably squander it because you still need both of these things to keep that wealth as well. What I'm really trying to say is that luck is sort of that first step that determines what you're launching off of. It doesn't really determine what happens after that. You still need to put in some sort of input. And if you don't, well, your luck can only get you so far anyways, because you're not doing any of the things to actually grow your wealth or get to your financial goals. But if you're financially stuck and you're not making a lot of progress, and this I suppose goes for any level of wealth, you might have to ask yourself which one of these factors is missing. Which one do you need to work on more? Maybe you don't know something about a particular investment and you put a bunch of money into it and now you've lost a bunch of money in that investment. That's probably a sort of savvy issue, a knowledge issue. Versus a discipline issue would be, okay, I'm suffering from lifestyle inflation. I'm now buying a bigger house and I don't want to downsize, even though I can really use the extra savings now, but I don't want to do that. That's sort of a discipline issue. And on the flip side, there are a lot of people who are very, very disciplined and they work a lot of hours and they're always putting in time towards their job or even towards their business. And they're putting that time in, they're putting the discipline in, but they don't have the savvy, just the base level of knowledge about different sort of financial instruments, different sort of financial products, and different sorts of ways to build wealth. Thankfully, at least in the age of something like YouTube, this savvy part is probably the easiest part to fix. Discipline is something that takes practice, and sometimes it just takes sort of a personal predisposition to be able to sit through things for a long time and get through them. Whereas the savvy part, that's something you can do by sitting through some classes, for example. That's one way that a lot of people build their knowledge. Another would be watching videos. Another would be actually doing things. So not to say that one is more valuable than the other, but there are lots of different ways to build savvy. Whereas discipline isn't something that you can necessarily just read about and then suddenly you become disciplined. It really is something that you have to work on. And whereas it's almost impossible to lose your financial savvy, if you know something, it's kind of hard to unknow it. It is pretty easy comparatively to become undisciplined and to lose that discipline because of your circumstances. Something changes and all of a sudden you're not following the same sort of rigid plan that you had in place. Not that plans can't change, but just the idea of really putting in the time consistently to get towards your financial goals, that can always change and you're always having to focus on it. Whereas once you know something, you know it and you can learn from there at that point. But it's not as though you unlearn the thing that you learned. Anyways, I just wanted to share this simple framework, and if you guys have thoughts on it, definitely let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, like, comment, subscribe, all that great stuff. And until next time, take care.